Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching, and this is how I did my Necromunda Ash Waste Nomads. Couple of ideas behind why I chose the colour scheme I'm going for. One, I wanted to blend in with the terrain set that I painted in last week's video, with the idea that that was a PDF station that was out in the ash wastes. These guys have raided that station, so they've nicked the clothing, the equipment, the tarpaulins, and turned that into their kit. So I wanted those colour schemes to reflect that. The other one, I've followed a fairly muted palette, so I've gone for all kind of same sides of the colour wheel for the bulk of the clothing and equipment, with just a couple of little bits of colour for visual interest. Now, I started off with a black spray and then silver over the top, like I do a lot of my Necromunda and 40k models. Just saves a lot of time when you're painting the metallic parts. Desert yellow on the cloth and the robes is as a first scheme and across all the models. Now what I've done, I've put that on different parts of the mirrored bodies. So obviously here in all the kit you get two of each body style. I've built them so that they've got different equipment and weapons to try and make a visual difference. And then when I'm painting them, I'm painting the opposite parts, my two base colours. So the first base colour was that desert yellow, the second base colour is this army green. So whatever I painted on the first models, desert yellow, I'm painting army green on the second. And that will help to split that visual difference and make the gang look like it's not just a duplicate of models. Now after that, I'm going for a sort of green-grey on all the pouches, the kind of tubes that link to the gas masks and things, and that again is very similar. It's like a halfway between these two colours, so it helps make them look a little bit more uniform, a little bit sort of military, but also actually a little bit more ragtag, because again all these colours are on different sections of different models. Now something to note, when you are painting, see I've made a bit of a mistake. I've ended up smearing that lighter green colour over the cloth. Fix anything that you make mistakes on as you go, because it saves time at the end, but try and be as neat and tidy as possible so that again the process can be quick. Now even though this is a video tutorial, there's always time for experimentation, and on all the carapaces of these creatures I've painted Majos purple, which is a contrast paint, because I wanted to see what this would do as a kind of under layer. Now thankfully it worked. I didn't do it on all of them, you'll see later. I painted this on 2 out of the 4 dustback helamites. And I did it at this stage of the painting process, kind of skipped ahead to the dustback, so I was going to do them last, but to give it time to dry for the time I got to painting them. I did this paint scheme over the course of Saturday morning and Sunday morning, so it was a fairly quick colour scheme, so you've got to think about your timings. Now I used a dark brown on the boots, and again here just showing you that, miss things all the time. Realise that the putties on the leg of this one, the straps, I didn't do the lighter colour that I wanted to use. Using the same brown I used for the boots on the couple of models that have got the kind of animal pelt on the shoulders. Now you could take a totally different colour if you wanted. This could be an opportunity to add in some visual difference with some sort of bright fur, but I wanted to keep the scheme fairly muted, and that ties in again with the colour I chose to do the bone, just a bleached bone colour. Really nice because it's again another sort of highlight above the desert yellow we've used for the cloth. So all of the colours I'm picking are kind of blending into one, and they're all kind of same sides of the colour wheel. A little bit of visual difference in with the retributor armour that I've done on the kind of gun shrouds, on some of the metal panels on them. Not too much, I've just put a little bit on each one, just again for a tiny bit of difference, but I don't want to end up being too visually bright. Now onto the dustback helamites. Now this is one that I haven't done the purple wash on that you just saw before, and I'm not really dry brushing here. I'm sort of halfway between. This is a bit of a dry brush stroke, a wet brush. I'm bashing that colour on. I'm being fairly thick on the coverage, but leaving little bits showing just to see what that metallic effect coming through on an armoured sort of skeleton would be. So again, not dry brushing, not wet brushing, somewhere in between, which would be an odd thing to say. Now this is one that I've done it over that purple. You can see little bits of that purple wash showing through. Now, is this any better than not bothering with that purple wash? Well, we'll see at the end and see what you think. It has a slightly visual difference. And again, nothing wrong with experimenting on different parts of the model to teach yourself something for when you do it next. Dropping down to a small brush here, dropping some blue into the eyes, and using the same blue on all these kind of canisters that the nomads are carrying with them, which I'm assuming is kind of water canisters. So I've chosen blue, just a little bit of visual difference and pop out. And I've not been super thorough in covering all the metallic areas on these canisters, because if you leave bits off, it'll just look like rust or where the paint's chipped off, or those kind of things. So these are not meant to be pristine kind of people. So that is the entire, all the base coats and everything done. And this time I'm going for a Citadel, as our Games Workshop Seraphim sepia. If you watch a lot of the channel, I frequently use a Vallejo sepia wash. Now that is bigger pot and cheaper, but it's also a dirtier wash. This is kind of a level down below that if you watch the channel, so it's a little bit cleaner. Now I didn't want them looking muddy because they're in the ash waste, I did want them looking dirty. So I've chosen for the GW sepia, but any kind of sepia wash would work for this effect. So you can see how they've dried. It's dried really nicely, and you could absolutely stop at this point because this would be tabletop ready, not a problem. But what I'm doing now is going back with the same colours I've already used and just doing a little bit of edge highlighting. Now, this desert yellow, I'm doing such a delicate edge highlight that it's not even showing up on the camera that I've done anything. Believe me, there is a slight visual difference and there is some highlighting going on there, but this is how subtle you're kind of being. So, you know, this is just filmed on an iPhone, so I'm sure if I filmed through a better camera, you would see and pick up those differences. But this is why I'm saying you could just skip this stage. So going back again, done the desert yellow, doing the green, that's showing up a little bit more, so I am actually putting some paint on the model, you can see, doing that, and then going through onto all those areas. Now as I'm working down the staff here, or the weapon, I'm just putting it probably not even on an eighth of there, just above where the strap wraps around, just to make it sort of pop slightly visually. So just the edges of the pouches here, just the very raised areas of the folds of cloth, and again just a tiny bit dropping into the eyes. So this would be perfectly fine for you to skip this step, but it does lift up the models. And again, you're not putting very much paint on here at all, tiny amounts. Now if you don't want to do the whole lot, because this can be a little bit time consuming, you could just drop onto your leader character, because that's the one everyone always picks up to have a look at. So you could put your effort into there to make it nice. And here's just a spin round of that leader, just showing you the sort of finished effect that we're going for on the gang. Now back onto the dustback helamites, just showing them side by side. So the one on the left is the one that we didn't do the purple wash, the one on the right is with the purple. Now the visual difference is very subtle, but it does add a slight purpley sheen to it, especially in the gaps. So again, minimal amounts of extra work, puts a little bit of visual difference, but nothing that you would massively notice. And I chose to do the eyes on these things blue, looks quite nice I think, and just again lift it a little bit. So would I do that purple wash on all of them for doing it again? I probably would do the other two, but again, it's an experiment, it's always fun to do that. And the other stages in terms of the edge highlighting is just exactly the same as you've done on the troopers so far. So a fun little scheme, that's it basically done. Really enjoyed this scheme actually. Just some final things to do in terms of the bases. I went for a very simple sand base, just with a wash of a kind of beastie brown colour. Real simple, real easy. And at the end I'm just putting on some of the burnt grass effect tufts. I don't remember where I got these from. They might have even been made at home by a friend, because I've got a friend who makes these things. But any kind of dead looking tufts would do. Or you could choose to do your bases, you know, grey into different kind of wastes, but definitely lifts them up a little bit. It also helps cover any little imperfections you might have done with the wash on the base, and definitely has a nice final effect. So back to that original shot of spinning around and seeing the gang, just with one of the helamites at the back there. Well, I'm really happy with how this paint scheme turned out. Super quick, fairly easy, and I think it'll look really nice on the battlefield, and hopefully blends in nicely with the terrain. So I'll drop a couple of shots on here of these models being used on the ash waste terrain. Hopefully you'll see what I mean around what I've tried to achieve. So look, that's it, that's the thing done. If you did enjoy that, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and also check me out on Instagram and Facebook, because there's stuff on there I don't necessarily share on here. Cheers everybody.